In recording. But I'll edit whatever, so don't worry. Just let it go.
Sweet.
Predilection. It's a hard word to say. Predilection.
That's going in all right.
Yeah. You try saying it 5 times fast. Yeah.
Predilection.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Then we're recording. The gentlemen are drawing. The time is right, I guess. Let's just get started then. All right then. Hello, and thank you for joining us once again for the attack. This is Tokyo Comic Attack. Today, we will be discussing Ripple, a predilection for Tina, giving you our insight, our thoughts, our feelings, and hopefully making sure that someone tells me why we are discussing this comic. For tonight, your 3 hosts are myself, Chris, also known as Sketch Bro, Mulele, or Mulele Redux, and Big Fat Dog Comics Oscar also is here joining us. Gentlemen, if you can say hello.
Hello.
Hey.
Welcome. So I kind of want to get things started off by putting a direct question onto you, Mulele, because this was your recommendation for us today, right?
Yeah.
You recommended this comic book for us, Ripple, Predilection for Tina. It's by Dave Cooper.
Yes.
100 and something pages, I believe, 107, 109 pages, but I loved a lot of what I looked at here, but I really wanted to know, why did you recommend this book to us?
Okay. So I should say I've been following Dave Cooper's artwork for a couple of years. And in fact, when I was in New York, I bought Pillowy, which is his latest big collection of paintings and line art. Excuse me. I've also seen some of his short animation recently that really impressed me. The style that he uses is kind of ugly, the style isn't ugly, the characters are ugly. And it seems to be just kind of his thing. The style that he uses is very, very fine and very mature, and he commands every stroke very,
I have
well.
to say, though, his line work in the comic is really good. Like, from what I saw throughout most of the comic, there's not like defined line shape for most of the characters, but there's hatching and cross-hatching used in order to create the image of like a rounded face or things like this. Or
So just to wrap up my answer, after all this time, Oscar a couple of episodes ago turned me on to Kayfabe, the YouTube channel with Ed Pisker and Jim Rugg, and they talked about, I looked on their channel for Dave Cooper specifically, and they did a whole thing on this book series called Weasel that he did, which had some elements of Ripple told through its 5-issue run. And I got online and ordered the first, I think, 2 episodes of Weasel, which are now like $26 a piece for like a 40-page floppy, which is ridiculous. But man, I had to have that shit in my hands. Has not arrived yet because we're still in Corona lockdown, and not much is coming from the States mail-wise. So I'm expecting it to come in the next, I don't know, month or so. One of the other books I ordered, they basically sent me an email and said they give up, but if it does actually arrive, to please notify them because they've already refunded my money. So I don't know what's happening with it, but I found a copy of the book through another way and shared it with the two of you. And I just wanted to discuss it because I was excited to finally have some of his comic work in my hands.
I'm also gonna try here and capture some of that for the YouTube. So, because I always believe that it's hard to talk about a comic, um, or to listen to someone talk about a comic when you can't see it. So I'll be trying to put up a few pages to give everyone a little sample and to make it clear what we're talking about.
Hmm.
I'll try to keep it to some of the first pages and the cover. I think we'll see how that works out in the end, but that should be on the YouTube if all goes well.
Yeah, Oscar, I know you didn't want to discuss this on air, but I wanted to just establish for the listeners, because this is our first review of this podcast, some ground rules. We'll try not to spoil the comic in the first little bit, maybe give our general thoughts on the book, and maybe, I don't know, if you guys want to put a star review or a number review, or just leave it to comments, we'll do that. And then we'll say spoilers, and from then on we'll get into the meat of this book.
Sounds good. I'm not
I
big
guess
on
it depends
numbers
on you
myself.
guys. Yeah, me too. Was gonna say thanks to like video games, Adam Sessler, the completionist, and things like this. I kind of like a more like read it or like buy it or like kind of recommendation. I'm not big on like like 5 stars or something, because what is 5 stars compared to 3 and 10, and I don't get that.
Okay,
Yeah,
well,
I think I think the maybe a way to say it is in the first part we'll kind of try to establish, try to answer the question: is this book for you, or this is what this book is about? If it's something you're interested in, then you can kind of stop there, skip ahead, and see for yourself. If you already have read the book, or if you're not going to read it or something, then you can hear us go into the deep dive, and that will cover the entire book from beginning to end, uh, all the spoilers. But we will clearly mark that, like, say when we're going to go into spoiler territory, and we'll probably put a marker in this description or something. Um, if you want to, if halfway through you're convinced and you want to go get it for yourself or something. I think that's a way we can agree on, I suppose, or
yeah, let's go for it. All right, so how are we going to attack this?
well, maybe I was thinking about this a little bit. Let me try. I think I can try to maybe give a general description of the story and what the book is about.
All right.
The story is about an illustrator for children's book. Um, Bit of a like a lonely guy in his 30s, lives alone in a bit of a crummy apartment, and he's not really satisfied with the work he does, and he wants to try something different and do a more erotic book, and he has the idea of getting a model that is not a conventional professional beautiful model, but like a more girl of the street kind of, um, like a realistic, like someone who wouldn't show up in any of these normal the books you would see on like nude models, or like a conventionally attractive person. And he sets out on the street, um, kind of like awkwardly contacts some women, and this one girl gets back to him and models for him. And the moment she basically drops her robe and goes full nude for him, he, and this is a beautiful term I've heard lately, he falls in lust for her, which is kind of like love, but very sexual. He's just obsessed with her, and they.
Well, I think that's about where we should leave it, man.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And that's it goes from there. Let me I'm gonna flip through the pages here a bit. Here's a few of the pages of the beginning of the book where we see him in his crummy apartment, thinking of the idea of coming up with the book, approaching some women, and here he finds Tina. Also, I think it's good to say up front that this book is very heavy on the sexual content. It has basically everything, I think.
Yeah, it definitely has everything. But it's
graphic.
Yeah, it is graphic, but I never felt it was gratuitous. It kind of seemed necessary. And I'll get to why a little bit in the spoiler section, but yeah, there seemed to be reason for all of this.
A name I was thinking of while going through the book is I was thinking of Robert Crumb a bit.
Sorry, Robert Crumb.
Crumb? Oh, it's not Crumb. Damn, I've been getting it wrong for years. Heard it here first, folks. I get names wrong. Crumb?
Crumb.
Like
Crumb.
breadcrumb.
Crumb. Okay, Robert Crumb. The way he, because I thought that it seems that parts of it, at first I thought it was, oh, this is just like a sexual fantasy, or like the author is kind of like writing down his own kind of sexual fantasies. The way I feel Crumb does a lot. But I think it's because you see the art style and it's like, oh, it has this kind of I'm not sure how to describe it, like kind of raunchy. It's sexual content, but it's very comics with an X kind of, like this. I feel like Crumb does that as well, like the over defined realistic rendering that makes it sexual in an almost perverse way. But I think that the style reminding me of it is kind of where it ended for me, because I feel subject matter, it goes way deeper, and I personally feel that Crumb's work it's kind of like you can kind of feel the guy jacking off as he's drawing it, and it's kind of like it's drawn for his own pleasure. Well, this book is definitely exploring some ideas. It's not just the author having a bit of a wank while he's drawing. If you guys help me out here a little bit. Or...
I think as far as the Robert Crumb jerking off to his own drawings, I think he actually talks about it in his documentary.
Robert Crumb?
What's that?
Confessions of Robert Crumb?
I don't remember the name of the documentary, but yeah, it came out in the early 90s, mid 90s, I don't know. Sorry, don't remember. As far as I know, there's only one documentary with Robert Crumb. It's directed by the same guy who did fuck my brain. It's directed by the same guy who did Ghost something. Ghost Black
World?
Widow wasn't. Yeah, Ghost World. Thank you.
Not Ghost Wolf.
No.
I was thinking of something else, I think.
Yeah. So same director, but anyway, in that documentary, he does talk about masturbating to his own work, and I think he kind of alludes to, well, doesn't everybody?
Yeah, I think when I first started reading this book, the graphic style, it definitely reminded me of those autobiographical comics with an X, where the comic is about the author, and it's the author is like this lonely, gross guy in his room, and page 3 is already whacking off. And at the end of chapter 1, there's literally a drawing of the main character kind of jacking off and jizzing to a wall. So I thought like, oh, it's I guess it's one of those comics, but I'm kind of I want to say this because I feel like a certain amount of people is gonna turn away by the mention of these kind of scenes, which is perfectly okay. But I do want to mention that I don't feel, while it's kind of in the category as in, if you don't want to watch a kind of gross 30 something guy check off onto his wall under any circumstances, yeah, this is not the comic for you. But
Well, I don't think it quite needs a trigger warning, man. But I think there is a question here that we should answer probably before going any further. Did you guys like the book?
I loved it, I think, because I read it once, and while reading it, I was really into it. Then I got to the end, and I was kind of like, huh, is this it? It felt a little, it didn't feel close to me, and I'm a person who's always incredibly influenced by the way something ends. Uh, the best movie ever with a bad ending will just have me walk out of the cinema in a bad mood, kind of. But I went through it a few more times, and I think I kind of I started thinking a little bit more about it, and I feel like I can place the ending a little better, maybe. But the book is, anyway, it kept me thinking, and I think that the book it's a joy to read, because it reads very, it kind of, it takes you for a ride, and I just, going back to it a little to make sure I got everything proper, I found myself just reading through it again. And I think it's always a good thing for a book if it's not only very easy to read, but if it makes you want to go back, and it's definitely a book that rewards going back and rereading it with the information you have from the entirety of the book. I don't feel like it's a book that you get everything it has to give in one reading. It's definitely one of those books you can buy, put on your shelf, every now and then you pull it out, you read it again, and you're like, huh. Well, and it kind of makes you think again. Though I'm not all but praised for it, but if it was a, do you like the book? Yeah, I definitely like the book. I have some things to say about the book, but I feel like that's also what makes it a good book, the fact that it inspires me and makes me think about it.
Would you recommend the book to generally everybody?
Yeah. It's a, because I feel there are some things in the book, and maybe some general stuff I'm not always sure I agree with, but in general, it's like, would I recommend someone to pick up this book and see for themselves? Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's where I'll leave it at, I suppose.
How about you, Chris?
All right. Question number 1. Yeah, I do like the book. I did enjoy reading through it, and like Oscar had mentioned, I am one of those persons and those people where after reading chapter 1, I turned off my phone, put it down, and I'm like, this is not for me. This is not my kind of comic. But I went back to work. I came back, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna dive back into this grabbed some coffee, read through the book again, and like continuing. I read chapter 1 again, and then continued onward. I like the story that is being conveyed. And for me, it's more or less what's not being said that hit me more than the actual story that's there. There are things that happen with the character and what the interactions was that I think on a face level, when you read it and you look at it, I get it, understandable. But I think there was more underlying tones that really stuck out to me as I was reading, and that was where I was like, yeah, okay, I see where this story is going. I kind of like this, and that kept me reading. Second question, I would not recommend this to everybody. Because I don't think that everybody would get it like how I see it. I think some people would be a chapter 1 reader and they would stop and they'd be like, it's disgusting. I don't want to read into this, blah, blah, blah. I don't think they would give it a chance. I would only recommend it to certain people who I think could look past it a bit more. Because I think there's too many people that would pick up this book and they would look at it at face value. And if they do, they're missing out on something.
Couldn't agree with you more there, yeah.
So that I will get into that as we break down details, but I read the story. My first impression after reading chapter 1, I was like, no, this isn't for me. But I give any comic that's given to me, I give it a chance. I read through the whole thing, and I'm really glad that I was like, let me come back to this later and read this, because that's when I sat down and I was looking at the tones, I was looking at the characters, I was looking at the world, and not only that, but it is, I think, beautifully drawn for how grotesque some things can be. The details, the line work that this guy does was really nice. So it kind of reminds me with the yellowish tone. I don't know if that was just the copy that we have or that's how the book actually is. There's another artist person that we know who kind of does small experimental comics on a similar type of yellow background with hatching, cross hatching. I'll bring it up later, but yeah, it was a very familiar indie style. And growing up in America, yeah, Oscar is right. That is an indie style that's on the back shelves where all the other indie artists and what are those things called again? I'm blanking on it right now. Where people just put like a couple of photocopy pages together and they put it out there. Oh man. Anyways, those little
Zines?
Zines.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Those little zines is probably where I would see like 5 or 10 pages of something similar in a comic book shop when I finally got to comic book stores. And those ones were interesting experimentations, but weren't fleshed out. This story is fleshed out. This story goes somewhere. This story has something. And I think for those who are willing to look for what's there, it's beneficial. What about you?
This comic made me feel a little bit sad that I hadn't found it earlier in my life. Because at this point, this comic is getting up on what? 20, 25 years old?
According to Zon.
Let me maybe flip through it a bit here.
Yeah, when was the publishing date?
Let me see. June 2003?
17? Oh, 2003. Yeah.
Just a moment.
the republishing date is 2017, but that's not what I'm looking for.
Yeah. No, I'm looking at yeah. So Weasel, where this was originally published, I think that was Dave Cooper's book, where he just had like lots of little stories. This was each chapter was a part of Weasel, and that was in 2001. So I would have loved to have gotten this when it had come out in 2001, but I was in Japan, 2001. I was very, very far from comics. I mean, I was
how mainstream was this when it came out, though? Because it feels like it could be anywhere on the bookshelf, really.
Yeah, this is true. But
was this a hidden gem, or?
I think Weasel might have been. There's no way that it would have been on my radar in Japan. There's just no way. I mean, I can understand where I might know the artist, and I think he was kind of like a third tier periphery kind of thing, where I maybe knew one of his characters, but I really. There was no way I could get this book while in Japan in 2001. And even though I was going to San Diego Comic-Con, I wasn't really looking at comics that way. And so the thing of it is, recently reading some of these books, I'm finding my love for comics again. So it kind of kicked off with rereading Akira, which we did with another podcast. It's on Deconstructing Comics, if anybody wants to look for it. And kind of going through and reading some other things like Uzumaki and now this. I'm really enjoying these books, and I'm looking forward to my next good read. I'm staying the fuck away from superhero comics because I can't stand that shit. But I think everybody who's come across me knows that. But had I found this kind of book in 2001, it may have pushed me in this direction for work rather than trying to work something out with Dark Horse and fit myself into their square peg or whatever, square hole. I think it would have influenced me to do something other than what I had done for those years. And I don't know that it would have made much of a difference in my comic career, but it would have made a difference to me. And that's the sadness I have. But beyond that, I really, really enjoyed this book on a lot of levels. Like I said at the beginning of the podcast, I really like the artwork from this artist. I have a couple of his books on the way, and I've got one of his books, other than the one we're reviewing, on my shelf. Yeah.
Very cutesy in its methodology in some ways. Like, I'm looking at some of his other some things that are up here. Pillowy, you said, was one of the other books that he did, right?
Yeah. It's a collection of his work, actually.
Yeah. Personally, the names I wrote down was, I think, Yoshitomo Nara, if you know her. She always draws these round children in a bit of a creepy. I felt like if basically her style and Crumb, if they had a baby, that would be close to the art style here, because it has those raw lines, but it still has that cute round touch to it at the same time. This stuff is really amazing. What I wanted to mention, though, as a little behind the scenes extra, is that Mulele, while bringing this book to us, has not said a word how he felt about this book until this very moment, which I think is very interesting, because he just quietly pushed this book in our direction. He's like, "Why don't you take a look?" And I'm not gonna say anything. And now we got one of the strongest love letters to a comic I've heard in a while. I think, man, that's it's interesting.
Well, no, I just really like the book. I like the story. I like the art style. I like the artist. I don't know much about him personally, but this was really inspirational to me, and it actually is the type of book that I would like to make when I'm making little reso-print books or any of that kind of stuff, which I would like to make again in the near future. It's just about time and energy and money, but as all things are. But would I recommend this to anyone? Yeah, anyone who is old enough to absorb the contents of this book. I wouldn't be giving it to kids, but because there's a lot of graphic shit in here. But anybody who's into comics, into art, into this kind of story, I would definitely want to get them to look at it. And if they like it, they like it. If they don't, they don't. And I'm not really concerned about that. I think it's something that should be seen. And then if they're like, why the fuck did you show me this? Well, then we can have a discussion.
But yeah, I think what we all trying to say here is definitely if you want to dive into it or at least try it or whatever, do read it. Just don't flip through the pages, and because the art style and the graphicness of it can be a bit of a barrier. I think if you come in not knowing anything about it, but once you read even a few pages, I feel like the storytelling and the writing is really good from the get-go. Once you read a few pages, you know you're not in for just like a weird porno zine or whatever. There's really something here.
So from
I feel like we're all
point,
chomping at the bit to get in to get to the good stuff. Are we done with the?
Yeah, let's break into it.
From this point on, here be spoilers.
Here be spoilers. All right.
The graphically detailed, nutty bit of spoilers. Yes. Which actually, on that point, like, how do I say this? The kinkiness and the graphicness of the story, was it something that you felt was aiding what was happening? Do you feel like it was necessary in order to tell the story?
Absolutely.
What?
Okay, so jumping all the way to the end. Sorry. There's a scene. So basically, the model and the artist become lovers, and after they have sex a few times, there's a point in the book where the poses that she strikes are a little bit more extreme. And
shall I jump around to it a bit, or do?
Yeah, jump around to it. It's the shot where you're basically looking at her asshole,
and she's got
she's got a kind of a dildo hiding her other bits, but the whole shot
dildo.
was that teddy bear dildo. The shot is made to make you focus on her anus, and we kind of see it from that perspective because that's what the artist is feeling or thinking, or that's kind of his objective. And it's also kind of explained in his dream that when he's having sex with this woman from behind, and she's asking him which one or which way. And when we come to the end of the book, he actually chooses to have anal sex with her and forces himself into her butt, and she's like, Now you know which way. And that's the end of the relationship. That was where it died.
Well, yeah, I think just to go over the entire story and maybe a bit more than rough strokes. They start a relationship, but I think the point is that he is very sexually repressed. He's like he has all these dreams about fucking women who are all tied up and from the get go. With the poses, he makes her pose in S&M gear and rubber stuff. So he obviously, and he has this collection of porn videos he keeps lying around. He obviously he has a lot of sexual tension in him that, as far as we know, he's not really exploring. And she comes into his life. He becomes completely obsessed with her, and she kind of um, opens up the floodgates for him. Um, and he, because the thing with the dream is kind of that, like, his dream, the way I see it anyway, it's kind of like the all the pent up sexual energy he has and like all the stuff he wants to do. And he tells her the dream, and there's a point where she tells him like a similar dream. She's like, yeah, I have a dream like that too, and then she tells him like a similar sexual story with like a clown and whatever. And so the climax of the book is that she lets him live out his fantasy of having like this kinky anal sex. And
I'm not sure that she necessarily let him. Yeah, it seemed a little bit less than
she kind of invites. Well,
I didn't feel that she really invited him. She may have been playing at something about his dream, but I think once it actually happened, she wasn't about that.
She was horrified in some ways, wasn't she?
Yeah. So, yeah, he did that. He was finished, and she was like, "All right, I'm done." And that was the end of the relationship. And I think what it meant for her, or at least the way I read it, is that he was not about her. He was about the fantasy. He was about controlling and abusing her for his sexual.
Oh yeah, but what I want to mention is I think it's important to mention her dream there, because after that moment where he lives his fantasy, he's like, oh, I'll do the clown thing for you. And she's like, what the fuck are you doing? And she says, well, I made all that shit up. Just because that sounded what you wanted to hear. And I think that's where the real break between them is, because he is, until that point, is under the impression that she is like completely on the same level as him, and like into the same, like has the same sexual weird repressions and everything. And that's the point where she actually says like, no, I'm nothing like you. And that's where he realizes, because I think in the beginning of the book he mentions like when he tells her a dream and she says he has a dream again, he mentioned he feels like a lonely schoolboy making his first friend or something. And like the so again with the dream, it's like everything he ever wanted came true. And then he realizes that when he tries to do the thing for her, he, like, suddenly that reality breaks apart, and he realizes, no, we're not on the same level. And that's the point where she leaves him, because yeah, there's this really creepy scene where he's like, oh yeah, I'll just tie you up some more because that's what you like, right? And that's where she's like, no, fuck off, and she just walks away. And that's where he realizes that he's been going off on his own, kind of. And that's where they kind of leave off. Maybe you want to kind of segue into my first impressions on the book here, because initially
wait a minute, man. Wait. Before you go there, man, about your interpretation of the ending, I still disagree. I still don't think that she invited him, and I don't think that she realized later with the clown stuff I think that's when he realized. She
No.
realized.
I'm saying. No, I'm not saying she invited him. No. That's not the point I'm making.
Okay.
No. I was talking about. I hope I didn't get that wrong. No, I was talking about that. That's when he realized he's basically still alone. I don't think she was like the beginning said that he was never really a good fit for her. But no, because I have some other stuff about her I wanna talk about and the nature of their relationship. But in my first read through, because it kind of ends with him. He writes like a book on the whole episode and makes some money of it. And reading through it the first time, I was like, man, if we chop it down, it's like, oh yeah, because we're in spoiler territory anyway.
Yeah.
The big twist of the book is that she's basically a high schooler. Like she's very strongly suggested to be underaged. Um, he realizes this, like he gets hints of it at several points in the book. Um, Basically finds like a school uniform in her backpack, but he doesn't give a shit. Um, and so if you reread the book like that, it's basically the guy picks off a random girl of the street, um, gets her into these sex things, and he's like, oh, you're kind of young and you're kind of shy. He just goes through all these red flags, um, and then kind of wanted to go in his later, but uh, at one point her dad shows up, and it's kind of clear, and he's like, huh, who's this older guy? Is he your boyfriend? And it just becomes more and more clear that she's like, oh, you don't have MTV. It's like, oh, MTV is for kids. And he doesn't pick up on this and basically uses this underage girl to live out his sexual fantasies, writes a book on it, gets money off the book, and that's kind of where it leaves him. I'm like, well, this guy, it doesn't really. Well, from my first reading anyway, I was like, he doesn't. He gets away scot free, kind of. Um, he makes bank off her, and
Where there was no punishment for it. There was nothing like police were involved, and no one kind of like reported him or anything. But it does feel like there is a bit of like a psychological fuck up in his head, especially as the earlier him and the later him vary in appearance. I was very shocked when he did the flashback and the flashback, the jump back, and he has this shorter hairstyle, this bald spot to him. I was like, oh yeah, the bald spot. Okay, thank you. But but then like he later down the road, he's done something with this, but he doesn't seem like he's well.
Oh no, definitely not.
Yeah.
at not a point in the book, I feel it's like he's at none of the point that we see him in his life, he seems like he has his shit together properly.
That is true. He doesn't have his shit proverbially together. But I do think that when he met Tina, he discovered something about himself that even he wasn't ready to fully explore. Then starting to explore it more and more, I think a little bit of himself got out there, and that was the true ground hitter, I think, for me. That was the thing that really made the comic take a different turn for things, where it wasn't the story of an artist trying to discover his next muse. It was the story of a person who hasn't had the ability to be himself is now getting that chance and doesn't want to lose it.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, but I going through the book a few times, it left the whole And because you asked the question, Mulele, was it necessary for the graphic stuff? Yes. I don't really feel comfortable with the whole underage angle. Like it gets. I keep going back to the. Let me flip through the book back and forth here a little bit, but there's this intro by David Cronenberg, where he mentions Lolita and Nabokov, but he also it's this really weird intro where can't seem to get it here. Let me read a bits of it so I can remember myself. Yeah, so he's talking about Tina, how she's like a real person or whatever, and then he's like, oh, I had a relationship with her. Oh no, that wasn't me. Tina's in a storybook, and he mentions like, how's Tina doing? Oh, she's probably fine. She knows how to take care of herself. She's a strong woman. That kind of intro, and then about the guy's like, oh, he's a bit of a loser and is looking for himself and everything, but. And then it's like, oh, this book is kind of Madame Bovary, or should I say the Lolita giggle. I don't like the tone of that very much, because I feel that I'm not sure if Tina... but that's more me disagreeing with the foreword or the way that the book is presented than with the book itself, because I still like the book. I'm just not sure I like the angle, because I don't feel like Tina is a strong, independent woman in his book. She's the way I saw it from reading it is she's this this lost girl, not pretty, overweight, issues with her dad a bit, issues with her previous boyfriends. I'm thinking the picture it paints of her. Well, it does say in the foreword, like Cronenberg does mention, like, I'm a little worried about her as well. I guess one of the questions the book kind of leaves me with is like, was she in a way a bit victimized here? Which is, by the way, something I think the book kind of plays with very well, which is probably one of its strengths too. But I don't think she needed to be underage for that. But there's these scenes. Let me go to the, if I can find the exact page here. There's this one scene, I think, right when they have sex for the first time, and there's this panel of her, because the intro mentions like her canines are very sexual, and whenever the sexual stuff starts, here's the page. She has this grin with like these fangs standing out, and it's such a predatory grin. Just
Tina,
from that
you
panel,
mean, or
yeah, Tina.
Yeah.
It almost feels like she's the predator, like she's the abuser and he's the victim, which is I don't know if any of you ever had to dig into Lolita for school or whatever, but I remember going through that book a bit, and a part of the in Lolita, the whole thing is this guy hooks up with this underage girl, but it's written from his perspective, and he's constantly pleading to the reader that she's the one in control, and that he's kind of the victim, and but the whole point of Lolita was like, it's a fucked up book written from the perspective of a pedophile. Like that was kind of the point the book was making. The book wasn't saying take this at face value, and it's not an apology, or it's not apologizing pedophiles everywhere, though it does maybe.
Can I stop
Go
you
ahead.
for 1 second? This was a book that you read in school?
Yeah, at some point. Full disclosure, I think my mom read it and kind of summarized it for me, because I wasn't as big into reading books as I was now. But
So it wasn't like a preferred reading. It wasn't like your school saying like, okay, this semester you're reading this book. It was just during that time period you read the book.
no, I do remember it being some form of assignment, I think.
Sorry, this is while you were in high school?
I want to say no, because I know how fucked up that sounds, but
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I'm mixing memories together because I remember my mom used to read these boring French murder mystery in the chateau books for me, and then kind of sum it up. Like, this is the guy who did it if they ask on the test.
No, it's okay. This is
Thanks,
I'm
mom.
trying to make
I
it
appreciate
like
that. No, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how, but I have a clear memory of reading the book, but like reading my mom's notes on it
okay.
more than
No,
reading.
that's
Maybe
that's
I
fine.
might have read it as research for a paper I was doing or something. I'm not sure where it comes in, but
No, just
some
because for us, then, like, the closest thing that I can think of is, and maybe Mulele, you might be able to correct me on this or not.
Hmm.
Do you know American Beauty?
Yeah.
Okay, because that's the closest thing that I can think of where I watched it during a younger period of my life, and it has that kind of like the predatory-esque like behavior to it, but you don't see it that way because you take the perspective of someone different, and so it's kind of shown, or like the light is not the same. If you Oscar, you know American Beauty?
yeah.
Okay,
Good
then
example.
yeah, I don't need to explain anything, but in the same way, that's what I'm kind of comparing it to, because I've never read this book, Lolita, so I'm kind of like making my comparison. So yeah, the closest thing that I can think of would be like that American Beauty, but it's not exactly the same. But I get it. It's a different perspective, where things may not add up the first time around. If you watch it again, like knowing that information, yeah, then you're like, wow, this is really bad, and oh my god, I can't believe he did that, and mm, I get that kind of chain of thoughts with it. So sorry, I was kind of I didn't know the book, so I was kind of like, I need to understand this a bit more. I'm very
No, man.
sorry for anything.
In general, feel free to stop me if I trail off too far, because once I
Okay.
start talking, I sometimes lose myself a
Um,
bit.
about this whole situation with the Lolita thing. Full disclosure.
Hmm.
Um, this book parallels one of my relationships. The woman that I was involved with was not a high school student. She was in her mid-20s,
Okay.
but at that time I was about 42. Um, so it exactly parallels everything. Um,
Mm.
I was full of repressed sexual shit, and she was a bit lost. And somehow we found each other, and we hung out for a year. And it was kind of a weird, fucked up relationship. Not on this level, but it ended kind of in the same way. Basically, um, I wasn't quite there for her. She wasn't quite there for me. And we just kind of parted ways. Um, but I'm kind of left with the same kind of feeling of, I mean, at the end of this book, let me skip to it. The last page, on the last page, he's looking at uh, this pillbox that Tina bought for him. It's the only thing that she ever gave him, and he talks about the book that he wrote about her, and he says, now I get complimentary and poorly constructed letters occasionally from people with whom I'm sure I share no common interests. They don't understand. Neither did Tina. Neither do I. And that's kind of it for this kind of relationship. No one understands what happened, but for him, he really misses her. And for me too, I miss that girl. But um, I'm not going to look for her. She's not going to look for me. we're done and we're not good for each other. And I think he kind of understands it in the same way. And so that's my approach to this story. The Lolita aspects of it, he's not interested in it. I'm not interested in that either. And it was actually from that relationship that I realized that I should not date anyone under 30 because the age difference is just too much. High school girls, I can't even fathom that shit. I haven't dated a high school girl since I was in high school.
Nope.
Why the fuck would I want to go back to that? Well, I didn't date so many, but still, why the fuck would I want to go back to that? That was some big nonsense. But at the same time, I'm not as repressed as this person is either.
But
so
I just want to go back to, because you mentioned like the scene where the which way scene.
Yeah.
Where he just goes kind of crazy, and consent isn't much of a big thing anymore. But how do you feel on this scene? Do you feel like how would you phrase this in the story?
What do you mean?
Would you say like this is the point where he goes too far, and
I don't know if he went too far or if he didn't go too far. But for her, I think that's the realization of, okay, this isn't about me. And so once you reach that point, why the fuck would you stay in the relationship? And I think that even though she later went to his bed and slept, even though he passed out on the spot, fantasy fulfilled, and found her later in his bed, I think she was done. And she was just finishing off the night in his bed, and then she'll go home in the morning. And that's what she did. That was the last time they met.
I'm looking at the page here, by the way. I've always wondered, crawling into bed, I had to wonder if she'd made any effort to bring me there with her. I never really understood that line. Can someone explain that one to me?
I think he's feeling some sort of romance about the situation.
Does he mean the bed?
Well, no, that after he passes out, she would look at him and say, "Oh, he's all tuckered out from the awesome fantasy sex he had. Let me bring him to the bed. Oh, he's too heavy. Well, let me just leave him here." Where the reality is more likely, she's like, you know what, I can't, and just went to the bed, dealt with herself, and he wasn't a thought for her. At least that's my take on it.
Yeah, it seems like misguided perception. Kind of like this is going to be kind of disgusting. You buy a lollipop, you take a lick of it, you drop it onto the ground. It's dirty. Someone else picks up the lollipop, they lick it. Now, it's the same lollipop, but the person who had it first definitely can enjoy that experience more because it was untainted. On the other person, not the same kind of not the same kind of
the guy who popped the lollipop's cherry, or
yeah, pretty much. Now that guy, that person, let's say, not guy, but that person who first had the lollipop before it dropped on the ground, don't you think they'd want it back? Like, oh man, that person just ate it. It's still good. I really want it. I want it back. I would love to have it. Whereas the other person is like, I can't believe I put this in my mouth. This is disgusting. I hate blah. That's what I think that scene is. I think he has this misguided perception of what happened. He doesn't know what's going on in her head. He doesn't know how she feels about the situation, nor did he really ask. What happened, boom. So now he's stuck on cloud 9, where she has a very hard, very truthful realization of this shit just happened. and she's out completely, I think.
Yeah.
Another interesting thing I feel is that when he talks near the end, trying to find the scene here, but when he talks near the end, he doesn't like, because the book is called Ripple, right?
Mhm.
And to him, Ripple seems to be this one, or this time span of crazy drug fueled sex they had over a couple of days, but the whole his dream being fulfilled is not Ripple. That's not the part he's longing for, and that's not the part that's gripping him and not letting him go. I feel. Uh, you guys with me there? Or?
So far, yeah.
Yeah. I agree.
So yeah, I think it's interesting that in the end he seems to be, because he's like, oh, no one understands what happened those nights. Um, that part kind of intrigued me because the big climax of him finally living out his fantasy seems to be, while it was the thing that kind of broke the straw that broke the camel's back maybe and drove her away. To him, it wasn't his big longing. That's still those drug fuel nights that are. And this is where I feel like the comic does some really good stuff. In showing us all these explicit sex scenes and everything, we don't actually see a lot of the Ripple nights. I believe.
Huh.
I've been flipping through the book here, but I think that yeah, here. So they're on the couch. Um, she gets pulled away off frame, and it's just a shot of the ceiling, and we see a few limbs and a phone on the floor. And the next shot is them tuckered out, naked on the couch, but clearly post coitus. So, of it's a very everything's shown kind of book, but the one dream moment that's keeps on haunting him after 3 years, we don't actually see that. That's merely suggested, and I think that's a very powerful statement, not statement, like a very powerful technique the book is using here. What really sets it apart, I feel. It's a lot of little interesting thing the book does. Another thing I wanted to mention is like the little he when he writes the story, because he wanted to be like, he mentions he wants to be this dark children's books guy, and when he tells the story of Tina, every now and then we get a page of him drawing it, and it's kind of drawn in the style of a children's book. Like the one where he tries to do the clown thing, and there's like one page is text and the other one is him in the wig, and it's drawn kind of in this children's book illustration style. Those bits are gold. I don't know. I just wanted to point those out because those are the bits I really liked about this book.
Yeah, it created a nice little weird summary and kind of like dive into the character whenever they did those illustrations, and it's nice because it kind of you're following this titular character around, you're following this guy around, but you have more insight onto how the experience was for him and how he's kind of obsessing over it. And to me, I feel like personally, I felt like the ripple, the moment that he's lusting for were the little things that revealed what he truly liked, but he wasn't aware of. That's kind of what I feel it was alluding to, but yeah, the different perspective, I guess.
Yeah, I think the book does a great job of leaving the core concept of ripple kind of vague, because that seems to be the point, that it's not something that can be grasped, and it's not something that can be expressed on the pages of a comic book. That's why they kind of go off screen during the ripple sex scenes, because it's and I think that perfectly explains it, because I think we all have these moments in our lives when we just feel so undescribably good or obsessed, or like a moment, it's so magical in our heads, and you could have you could videotape it, and it just be, I don't know, you just see a videotape of a guy looking at the water of the sea or whatever, and he'd be like, no, that was something magical and crazy happened in those few minutes, but something you'd never be able to capture on video or whatever. And I feel like, to me, that's the kind of mood the whole ripple thing managed to capture by not showing it, and showing us everything else.
Yeah, I get that feeling as well. Like there's a lot of the journey is more important than the destination situations. When looking at this and kind of comparing it, where, like you said, there are things in there that they did, moments that they spent together, sitting on the couch, when she's upset, him trying to make her happy, and she actually does kind of smile back at him. The lighter moments where they're together, even when it gets later into the book and he's still trying to do those same things, but she pushes him away, he still works towards it. He's still very, like, in his head, and so he's kind of yearning for, I think at that point he's starting to yearn for what he had, but that's feels like that saying where it's the destination's not important, but the journey to get there is, or something like that. That quote, I think, is a definite showrunner in the background when you're reading this, because that's the moment, like, I got to, like, I think it was chapter 3 where it was, he was doing a few of the cute illustrations of him and Tina. Maybe it's chapter 2 where he notices, like, her in the robe, and there's like a slip.
That's in the beginning. Yeah.
That's in the beginning. Yeah. But there was another scene like that later on, I think, with the bondage suit, and when they were just kind of relaxing and eating. There, he has these kind of, like, I'm enjoying myself, feeling like this situation is comforting. This situation is where I want to be, and that feels like, oh yeah, this author is trying to tell me, like, enjoy those moments while it lasts, kind of a thing. I don't know.
Interesting.
Yeah, I had a really I had a really, like, what the hell are you trying to tell me moment, because again, like, when I was first reading this, I was like, why did you want me to read this book before, like, creating my own, like, opinions on it and getting in depth with it. And yeah, to me, I think it speaks a different type of volume, so to speak. I don't know.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what you said there about the journey, everything. I still want to circle back to the fact that I guess I can basically say that the main two things I don't really like about the book is the underage stuff being glossed over, and the intro doing the whole Nabokov thing, because it frames it in a light that I think kind of misses what I feel is the point of all this, because the point isn't. I think the story is more interesting, or more genuine when it's about, like, the trying to capture the moment that is lost, kind of thing, which it seems the ripple is referring to, rather than these people in their messed up relationship and who's using who and everything. Because if you have that kind of story with the girl being underage, and then you start mentioning Nabokov, then you get into, that's just why go into those creepy territories. I don't know. I I don't want to be stuck on that, but it intrigued me that I kind of went back and reread it, because if you reread it knowing that she's kind of underage, there are some interesting bits. For example, I noticed that in the beginning, he mentions she kind of looks young, but when she's first drawn naked, we never see her her vagina or her pubic hair or anything. Um, and then in the second session, she comes back, and the first thing she does is show that she shaved completely. Um, so obviously now she looks younger because she shaved, but we're kind of not given a frame of reference. Um, and there's these little bits. I think at one point she answers the phone and she's like, "Yeah, I'm still with the Johnsons or whatever." And then the scene where her dad comes into restaurants, he's like, "I called the Johnsons and they said blah 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 blah." Basically, we're at their place. Um, so there's I feel like there's definitely a trail of breadcrumbs that the book leaves for the reader to follow and kind of realize that um, she's kind of young, or she's very young, but
I think it was very clear, actually, but I think that's the point. He didn't want to know, because when he saw the high school uniform, he's like, and he just puts it back and pretends he never saw it.
I guess I couldn't, I still can't quite place that. Can you maybe give me your take on that? I'm still not sure what they're trying to tell with that part. I mean,
it goes to the point of his fantasy. He has a specific agenda with this, whether he's aware of it or not. He's just chasing his fantasy, and the idea that she's a high schooler or she lives with her parents or whatever else is going on in her life, he's not interested in that. He's not interested in her. He's only about the fantasy. So when it comes to all of these things that point out the reality that she's living in, each time he denies it. So with her father, with the fact that she looks very young, even with whether or not she gave consent for the sex that they had at the end, all of this is denied. And when it comes down to it, in an attempt to get her to stay longer, he comes up with this idea that he should tie her up, thinking that that's her fantasy.
Oh God, yeah, that was creepy.
Yeah, and
that's a very strong panel as well.
And so what it does is it just reinforces how fucked up the relationship is, and how fucked up he is, and why she should leave. Why she should start in the first place, I'm not entirely sure. But like you said, she's kind of a lost person.
Yeah, no, I can easily see that, because she's clearly, like, I think that's actually, the book makes that clear, why is she with this guy. That's why we get the story of her previous boyfriend. It's never mentioned, but I feel like, because the book clearly mentions that she's not attractive and she's overweight and she's not anyone's ideal girl. So I feel that the story there is that, like with her previous boyfriend, she's kind of happy to have male interest, to the point where she kind of, and she definitely has this very sexual side, but when she finds someone who's sexually interested in her, she kind of, it kind of gets out of hand, because she has this, she's a very sexual person herself, but being very young and inexperienced, she's not good at setting those boundaries yet, and she's obviously not confident enough to be like, no, I'm dumping this guy and getting a new one. Like guys come to her. I feel like the previous boyfriend, he got angry at her, saying like, why are you still so nice to him? And she's like, shut up, you don't get it. And I think that part kind of means that she just doesn't have the confidence to be like, fuck this guy, I'm better than that, because she doesn't really feel better. Yeah, that's how I saw that. And
Okay.
that's why I feel like the previous boyfriend is in the book too. That's kind of his role of telling us that about her.
Yeah, no, I can see it when you say it. Yeah. I mean, for me, there's no part of this book that I would actually that I could cut out of it. If it loses any part of it, I think it loses a part of itself.
Yeah, no, I'm beginning to place it better. It was a piece of the puzzle I couldn't quite fit in there, especially because of the Nabokov stuff at the beginning. But
yeah, I think you're right. The Cronenberg forward doesn't really help the story here. It does set it up in a bad way.
Honestly, to cut out anything, I'd probably. But I feel this with most books, just like the intro. People's intros are just. I usually try to skip them or not read them because it's a bad idea to read someone's opinions on a book before starting it yourself, because it kind of.
Yeah, see, I didn't even look at the top where it said by David Cronenberg. I just started reading and looking at the gorgeous artwork underneath it. And then it comes to the end, it's like, oh, by David Cronenberg. I was like, okay, this wasn't the author.
There is an interesting little bit there, though, because in the end, in the end page, he says, like, they even printed the quote on the back, presumably from someone who I presume is well known. And he suggested Ripple was outrageous, so he's kind of like, some douchebag wrote the intro. I feel like that might be a little nudge and a wink there. I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, Cronenberg, I don't think is quite as random as he suggests. I mean, he is quite a famous Canadian director.
I'm not sure if that's tongue in cheek or not, but this kind of books you never know, I suppose.
Well, I would assume that Cronenberg came in for the reprint, not for the original. But
yeah, it's possible that maybe just slapped it in there later too. I did read somewhere that before he stepped down as a comic book artist, he had a gallery show, and in the gallery show, he gave people at that show a copy of Ripple.
Yeah.
The author, Dave Cooper.
Okay. Did not know that he was done with comics.
I don't think he's done with it. I think on his website or something he just puts painter, like he literally lists himself painter, comic artist, something else. So I think he considers himself to be a painter first and a comic book artist second at this point.
To be honest, his paintings, although they're quite interesting, they don't draw me in as much as his comics or his drawing work. I just love his illustration and I love his comics, but the paintings sometimes I feel are just a little bit too light and airy.
Nice.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting how it's mentioned how, what's our main character's name here? Martin, I believe.
Yeah.
That he's kind of into oil painting as well. Midway the book.
Yeah.
He starts painting and I guess is that an obvious bit of self-insertion, or how?
Well, I mean, take from experience, right? Like, you start with what you know, and then modify it, right? It's what they say a lot for making stories in comic books. Mulele, you've also recommended that kind of thing as well when it comes to, like, writing your stories, is take from what you know and then kind of mold it into something.
Hey, all of my comics are about me. Even the ones that don't directly reference me. So I mean, it's nothing that I tried to do. It's just something that kind of happened. And I just assume that, everybody's work is about themselves anyway. I don't think I would go as far as to suggest that there are any selfless comic artists out there. At least ones who are writing their own work. If you're writing like Captain America or some shit, then yeah, it's about Captain America. But anyway,
no, Captain America's me. What are you talking about? I
yeah.
am.
Well, we're all Captain America at heart. Steve Rogers is everybody. I guess it's the blonde hair and blue eyes that I identify with. Anyway, any last thoughts on Ripple?
Oh man, it's hard to make a last thought with this because I think Ripple makes a great discussion piece if you're willing to have the discussion. Oscar brings up a very strong point about this where a very inappropriate relationship did happen in this. And if you know about it going in, it kind of changes things for you. To be honest with you, and I'm just going to put this out there, reading the story, the moment he picked up the school uniform is the moment that I also realized, oh, she's underage.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, for the entire story, I thought it was a secret relationship. I thought there was something wrong. But the moment he was like, school uniform, that's when I also knew. I didn't know beforehand or any other things. I was along for the ride, seeing how this was going. So for me, it took me back and I was aghast, but I moved forward with it. If you're willing to see what the story has to offer and are willing to kind of discuss it without prejudice, without pointing fingers, without making it more than what it is, I think that the story has a lot to offer people who decide to read it.
Interesting. Oscar?
It's just, this book is so many small little details I love about it. I just wanted to mention that the scene, I'm not sure if like Chris, it took me all the way to the school uniform. I'm not sure if it's important at what point you realize that she's really young, but going back and reading it, I just found it funny that there's one shot of the dad where he has these very big canines. And if you kind of read it again, it's like, oh yeah, of course that's the dad. I mean, look at those fangs.
Right.
Who else is that gonna be?
Because for most American guys, like meeting, like I don't think you have this in Europe like we do in America. When you go to like prom or you meet your girlfriend's parents for the first time in America, you meet their family, and then the dad is always like this bloodthirsty killer. And like
yeah.
the moment that scene popped up where the guy is there and he's all like, and it's like, he's really vicious. I wonder if that is his dad. And it just makes me flash back to like movies and other situations where you meet the dad and he's just like, so you like my daughter, huh? I have a 45 in the back. If you do anything, I will kill you.
Yeah, always with the gun.
It's American.
Yeah.
You know, about the breadcrumbs though, I think another point that's interesting is that they kind of muddy the water. I found a page here where he goes. So he mentions like the dirty looks he gets when he's with her in public, but there's a scene where he goes out on his own, and he's already imagining getting dirty looks from everyone. So when he gets like dirty looks in public, you think it's a continuation of him just imagining people focusing on him. So it's very interesting how they kind of keep the tension there.
But it also kind of points to the fact that everybody else understood that she was underage, but he didn't.
Yeah.
Really, really not paying attention to her at all.
It's really bad when you know it. Like Oscar, you're right. Like the flags are all there, and it's like,
Yeah.
I like. It just makes me think. Like in Japan, they have those relationships where it's like a teen idol is dating another guy, and the guy is like clearly 20 something, 30 something, and she's clearly like 18-ish esque, and they're dating, and it's like they're seen in public holding hands, and this couple just got together and they're going to Odaiba and they're riding the Ferris wheel. It's like, is that the same thing? Is it the same kind of perspective look that you would have in, for example, the Americas, and that kind of thing would happen? Like, that just takes me for a ride. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Japan is another beast entirely on those kind of.
Yeah.
But I must say that that was my main gripe with the book. Talking it over with you guys, I do see how it fits in the story, and I think at this point it's more the forward that's bothering me because I can see how it's necessary, and yeah, no, it is hard to wrap up this book because I feel um, it's a book that keeps on giving. You can dive in a couple of times, and uh, the way it's structured and paced, um, the I feel like the ride it's interesting. It gives you a lot of stuff to analyze every time you go through it, um, which I feel is not something you expect for the genre and style it seems to be in. You get this zine style imagery and this very well thought out and well written story, which is really interesting.
Hmm.
Yeah, I guess if I had to wrap it up, I would just say it's a very interesting book. Um, if I ever have some leftover funds, I might wanna want that on my bookshelf somewhere.
Well,
Uh,
after the Backstreet tour is over and people can actually go out and get things, I'm pretty sure it's going to be nice to order some things again, and
yeah,
or
once
go
we-
to bookstores and buy things again. So I'll be right there with you, making a new
Oh yeah.
collection of things.
Yeah, definitely.
Mulele, anything you want to add to the Loft Leather? You gave it already, or?
No, I'm inspired. I understand it on a deeper level for having talked to you guys about it. I I still think it's a wonderful book, even though the relationship is very fucked up.
Hmm.
Um, I don't feel that. Well, let's say this: if you're reading this book, if you're looking at this book, and maybe this should have been something I said in the non-spoiler part, but um, it's not the graphicness of the sexual situation or um, uh, yeah, I guess that's about it. But it's not that so much. When
Hmm.
you come to the end of chapter one and you see that scene of him jerking off onto the wall, um, do not focus so much on that, but rather on why he did that.
Hmm.
And the whys are so much more interesting than anything else. It is a little bit visceral, but it is a hard journey, but it is very much worth it. And once you've kind of gone through it, yeah, it's very easy to go through it a second time.
Yeah, I feel like it does throw you off with the crumb imagery where you're like, oh, this is another one of those porno books where you're just sitting tapping your foot as the author explains all the little kinks he likes, but it's definitely not that.
Yeah, this reminds me of a statement that a comic artist who I used to talk to, Felipe Smith, when he was doing his comics like Peebo Chu and a few other ones, he made a statement to me and a few other guys. He's like, on the first page of my comic, I put an image that is very graphically outstanding. If you can get past this page and continue reading, I'm pretty sure you're going to enjoy what you see. I have the feeling that chapter 1 is the same way. It's kind of like a flash warning. Like, this is going to become uncomfortable, but I hope that you stick along and stay for the ride, kind of a thing. Because while on one hand, Felipe, one of the novels that I read, you open the first page and there's this really detailed African American giving you the middle finger. I was like, page 2. It's not as like front forward as that. And I think it's a good metaphor for the book. Chapter 1 is a nice representation of like, there's a story, there's something that's happening, there's going to be shocking things, but stick around because it pays off, I think.
Yeah. That's exactly my sentiment.
I do think that it's almost unfortunate that it's almost unfortunate that you can only read a book the first time once, because hearing that this book came out in chapters in a like serialized publication, it makes me wonder what the reading experience would be on one of those. I sometimes feel this with some of the manga as well, because I usually read them all bundled up in the tankobon, and some of the chapters make me feel like how would this change the perception of the story if I had to like wait a week between this chapter and the other chapter.
Oh God, I'm still waiting for some stories to finish, man.
and the way the chapters are divided in this one gives me that same feeling of like if you had to wait a long amount between one or two or some of the ones, because it definitely gets the graphic content or like the sex scenes definitely speed up as well as the chapters increase. So,
well, Oscar, let me ask you one quick question then.
Sure.
Your mother.
Yes.
Did she ever watch soap operas while you were growing up?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Then I guess you've never had the experience of like your mother like coming back home and being like, "Oh my God, my stories are on. I'm so excited to see what happens next," kind of a thing.
I know the idea of that from television tropes, but no, I have never experienced it myself.
Yeah, I mean, for me, when I was buying comic books and my mom finally saw that, like, oh yeah, I was into comic books or I was into like a series of video games, like she would say the same thing, like, oh, he needs his stories, he needs to continue it. Yeah, so
that's kind of beautiful, man. We all need our stories.
we all need our stories, and I think that's it. Like it kind of would have that feeling to it, that nick to it, I guess. I don't know.
If I had come to the end of chapter 1 and knowing that, okay, the next issue is going to be out in what, a month, 2 months, whatever the interval was for Weasel, I'm not sure that I would be so hot to pick it up. Because the first chapter, although it's interesting, it kind of ends on kind of a hard, weird note, and I'm really not sure what the author is getting us into. But by the end of chapter 2, okay, I'm in, and I want to see it through. I think there's just not quite enough trust built up in the first chapter, but yeah.
Now,
so,
see, that brings a graphic novel versus your leaflets. Your what did you call them before? Your
zines?
Zines, yeah.
Zine?
No. For floppies.
Yeah.
That brings that argument back to the table. Whereas if this was a floppy and chapter 1 is right there and all you had was chapter 1 to make your opinion on this comic, would it be the same as you have now after reading the whole thing?
It definitely wouldn't, because the
Mhm.
ending of the book, getting to the end of the book, coming to some sort of finality with this story, and then going back and reading it a second time, that is where it really is good. You kind of realize it's good. I mean, everybody starts well. Everybody starts fine. This one, kind of the first 20% of this book ends in kind of a hard way, and so you're just kind of not sure what to do with this. So either you're in it for the artwork, you're in it for the suggestion that there's more depravity to come, or you're so intrigued by what happened. But for me, I couldn't quite pick up on what was coming for with just the first chapter. So yeah, for me, I'm in for the artwork, really. But if I'm in 2001 picking up copies of this, the first one is so crazy. Maybe if I saw it on a shelf, I'm like, oh, number 2. Well, they continue the story. Okay, let me get this. But I wouldn't be like, oh shit, I need to get this. Whereas now, having read the whole thing, I'm much more about, okay, I need a hard copy of this on my shelf. That's it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Oscar, would you be the same way? I'm kind of curious. If you were presented with the floppy of chapter 1, just chapter 1, do you think your perspective of this story would be the same as you have now with a full story, or different?
Yeah, no, I think I'm with Mulele there. Chapter 1, making it stand on its own, is definitely an entire beast entirely, and I feel like it does kind of not lessen, but I think I pretty much agree with Mulele that if it's just chapter 1, yeah, there might have been a chance that I hadn't tagged along for the rest of the ride, because what makes the book so interesting is the way it ramps up. Is and if you don't know that getting in, if you think like, oh, it's gonna be more of this, like in this tone, without the explosiveness of like the graphical erotic stuff and everything, it doesn't have that same hook. Though it's still a good chapter, and it's well written. Yeah, basically exactly what Mulele said. They like, if it's at the right place in the right time, yeah, you might pick it up, but there's indeed a chance that
You might not be that mindset for
yeah,
it.
it would have been a shame, but yeah, I think thinking about it in this book's case, um, it might be ideal to consume it in its collected form, so to say. What do you think, Chris?
I don't think you can really get it in its separate form so much anymore. At least not in any sort of reasonably priced way.
No, I don't think so either. No, because it's according to Amazon, but no, it's good to know, because there's a lot of like situations out there where people have only read one chapter, and it's like you said, that experience, that feeling. Sometimes people continue with it, sometimes people wouldn't. If it was a collection magazine like a Tokyo Pop or like a Shonen Jump kind of thing, and you got this chapter in there, would it be something that haunts you until you find the next chapter? Or if it's something that's just kind of like, well, I experienced that weird thing, I don't want that. I don't want to get into that kind of thing. And yeah, it's just kind of interesting to hear other people's opinions on that, because there's a lot of stories out there where, as a collection, it hits you very hard, but with just one piece of it, it's not as impactful, I think.
Yeah.
Just for editing's sake, I'm stopping the recording here.
Wait, why?
No,
Why?
for the screen thing. It's all right.
Okay.
Just need that timestamp for later.
Okay, I have one last thing I wanted to ask you guys.
What's up?
Having read this in its entirety, and actually, it sounds pretty much like you enjoyed it, even though it was a tough read. How much do you trust this author if you see his name on another book?
Trust is a weird word.
Trust
I'd be interested.
Well, trust is in, yeah, I'm going to pick up this book because that first story was so good. Or, oh, okay, I know this author. Let me check out the work. Or, yeah, it was good, but I doubt that he'll have another book as good, so I'm just going to let it go. I mean, where would you stand with it?
Don't say let it go.
All right.
I think personally, like I said before, it's not usually my usual cup of tea. So I probably won't have the instinct to immediately like pick it up and buy it. But now that I've read one of his works, if I was to see his name in a comic book store, I would pick up the book and take a flip through to see what it's about. Mm-hmm. And I would notice it and other books around it to see what they have to offer. So now that I'm in, I would pay attention a bit more. But it's just not my normal like rotation of comic books that I would go down. So by myself, if I've never known him before, no, I probably wouldn't. But now that I do, yeah, I would definitely take a look at his other books and see what's there. See if there's something else interesting.
Okay.
Oscar, personally, yeah, the first thing I did after finishing the book, or finishing it a few times, I can't remember, but I went to his website because I was intrigued just to check out his other stuff, and seeing his oil paintings, I saw like a bit of his one of his animated movies, which was like a 3D thing about a guy being chased by these women monsters with really big butts, and there was a bunch of fruit that looks like boobs and everything. And just from skimming that kind of stuff, I got the general impression that this kind of might have been a magnum opus or something, like the book that kind of, because I saw a lot of elements in his paintings and his other work that I saw come together in Ripple, and I felt like, well, I haven't really dug into his body of work, but I felt like a lot of the just glimpsing his other work, it felt like he was poking at the same ideas and themes as Ripple, but not as masterfully as he did in this one. So while I'd pick up one of his books, because this book is very interesting. So if it was another book kind of in this style, I'd be interested, but I'd flip it through first to see if he has more to say, because something about this book feels so personal that it feels like it's a book that's very close to the chest, and I'm not sure if that kind of thing works twice. He definitely had something he wanted to say with this one, and the same kind of message in another book. I'm not sure if that would work as well as this one. if he can pull it off a second time, or if he has something else to say, I'd be there for it. Yeah, but just he's definitely on my radar, but I wouldn't call myself a blind fan who pre-orders his book, so to speak. Yeah, no, I definitely say he's on my radar, and if anything else comes recommended by him, but I definitely want it to be something similar, like the same, because I felt like a lot of things that intrigued me with this book are very specific to the graphic novel format. I feel.
Mhm.
Because I watched the little animation he made, but I don't think I'm even gonna go back and finish that because that wasn't that didn't grab me the way this book did. Because the style of his pencils and the pacing and everything, it just worked very well in the format of a graphic novel, while the bits I've seen of his style in the form of like a 3D animated uh, short movie didn't have the same impact and power, raw power that this book had.
Mm. Okay. I was a super fan before I got to this one, and it's just increased my desire to get more of his work. So, yeah, I would blind pre-order, especially if it was a comic. Um, if it's a collection of his paintings, I might have to take a flip through first. But if it's a comic, I'm there. I would say, just to kind of point to his body of work, if you're curious about his work, the video that Kayfabe did on Dave Cooper is really, really good, really informative, and that's what led me to this book. So go check that one out. It's really interesting.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah.
Good.
So we've been running about 2 hours, man. Do we have any more to say?
I want to just give you guys a little bit to digest. I already told you guys earlier about what was it called? Kin, movie that
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get to watch. I saw the trailer and I was like, this seems really interesting. So I'm gonna dive into that soon and watch that and see how that is. But
Mm.
a friend recommended another TV show to me that I want you guys to kind of look into also,
Okay.
because it is rotoscoped. The entire series is rotoscoped, and
Mm-hmm.
it's called Undone.
Undone. Okay.
Yes.
Feature review.
Maybe. If I can watch everything, then I would love to talk about it. Because it seems like a really cool premise, and I'm always a fan of watching rotoscoped work. From early days of university and studies and stuff like that. Yeah, so I wanted to put those recommendations out there. If anybody knows anything about it, or yeah, anything else, let's get into it another time.
Okay.
Cool.
So wrap up.
Wrap up. I think, yeah.
All right then. Yeah, I guess nothing else really to be said then. We spoke about Ripple, Predilection, Fortina. Pretty good story. Kind of hoping that maybe I'll revisit it again, or other people. If you have any questions, if the viewers, the listeners, have any questions about this, our email address is tokyocomicattack@gmail.com. Did I get that
That's
right?
right. Yes.
Okay. Please send us an email. Contact us. Give us your questions, inquiries, thoughts, feelings, and ideas about this episode or other episodes.
Fan art.
Fan art. What do you... Yeah, I am initiating the Tina challenge based off of what we talked about tonight. Any artist listening to this, if you know what Tina looks like, if you think you know what Tina looks like, draw it and send it to us. Any fan art will be reviewed by us. We'll talk about it on the podcast, and the best will get I don't know what can we give them?
A free beer in Tokyo, but travel to Tokyo is not provided.
Once the tour is over.
Yeah, once
that would be nice. Yeah, maybe a virtual tour. Who knows?
Mm.
But yes,
where can people
let's
find
do
us,
this.
Chris?
Where can they find you? So we have first and foremost, Oscar, your Instagram,
yes,
and your now Patreon is active, right?
Yes, very well. It was existence before, but now I've finished up setting up the page and everything. It's still not much to look at, but it's if you absolutely must throw some money at me, there's Patreon.
Man, that's not a good sale. If you must throw money at me, no.
I mean, there's nothing there on the Patreon really, and it's probably more cost effective to just PayPal me money. So send me an email if you want to PayPal me money. Alternatively, I have some books on Gumroad that are available from $0 or whatever you want to pay for them. It's some of my older work, but still interesting. Yes. Oh yeah, thanks to a couple of people.
A lot of great work.
Some people have been downloading Magic Salad. I've been getting a few email pop-ups. If that's anyone who's listening, thank you very much. I really appreciate that.
Very nice.
Otherwise, find me on Instagram and everywhere. Big Fat Dog Comics. That's it for me.
Yes. Big Fat Dog Comics. There's Patreon, there's Gumroad, there's Instagram. Mulele, you have Patreon, you have Insta, you have your own website.
Yeah, pretty much. The website is mulele.com, and everything else, Instagram, Patreon, and Twitter are Mulele Redux. That's it.
There you go. Mulele Redux. He's up there. Find his work. You know,
maybe give the people what did they get on the Patreon?
What did they get on Patreon?
Actually, they get a lot of production notes. They get behind the scenes stuff on the comics that I'm making now. Right now, I'm working on Pareidolia. I'm about the end of chapter. Actually, by the time this podcast goes out, I'll be done with chapter 2 of Pareidolia and be heading into chapter 3.
Congrats.
Yeah, thank you. But there are a lot of chapters. They're kind of like micro chapters because they're only 4 pages at a clip. So, but each one tells kind of a complete or semi-complete segment of a story. So, I mean, I do put up some stuff on Instagram, but I'm saving most of it for Patreon because I want to have some value there for the patrons. But anyway, find me on any of those. And if you absolutely must throw money at me, I'll be very happy. And one point, for anybody who must throw $5 at me on Patreon, every couple of months I'll be sending out a little bit of artwork to everyone in that tier. So
very nice.
Come on
in. Very nice indeed. I like this whole "if you absolutely must throw money at me" thing that we're floating throughout this entire series. Me too, please. If you absolutely must throw money at me, which I really hope you do, you can do so at my Patreon as well. I have Instagram. I have Gumroad. It is under, of course, Sketchfro. So please, if you absolutely must, please throw money at me for $1, $5 or more. You get some really good things out there. So Yeah,
You have some stuff
I
on
guess-
Gumroad too, right? Or
I do. I have comics up on Gumroad. It will be updated as soon as I finish my comic, but Patreons get my comics first. They also get master editions for free. Once the editions are revised or changed, all Patreons get that stuff for free. I don't charge them for that kind of stuff. But as the comics are rolling along, as I'm producing new chapters or new pages, they see that. But I was also thinking if any artists are out there, I was going to start posting like downloadable Photoshop pages where you can see how my process is, because I just started doing like newer things like making rain for the comic. And God, that was such a process. And it's so difficult learning from like 3 different artists how they do their things and then kind of mixing and matching it. And so I'm like, if anybody wants to learn from this, maybe I'll put a Photoshop file together that you can kind of test it and start putting those up on the Patreon as well. But only if people want it. Anywho.
I saw a little snippet of that on Instagram, and it looked very intriguing. Lots of filters and blurring and crazy stuff.
It is a complicated, beautiful mess, but let me tell you, I'm really happy with how my pages are for this final chapter, which should be finished within the next hour. Oh God. I can't wait to be done with the coloring. You have no idea. But anyways, let me wrap this up by saying thank you guys very much for tuning in to Tokyo Comic Attack. We have hopefully a new episode again Tuesdays, right? Tuesdays new episodes go up.
Tuesday, possibly Wednesday, as things go. But because the university semester just started, I'm a little bit slumped sometimes. So if it goes up on Wednesday, please forgive. But usually Tuesday, yes.
And again, this might be the first episode where there's actually some extra interesting bits on the YouTube. If we put up the recording of that comic, hopefully if that's all right and everything. But find us on YouTube, Tokyo Comic Attack. You can find basically the all the episodes there. But we have to snip some of the interesting music parts off. Yeah, that's c'est la vie, I suppose.
C'est la vie. Well, from us here then, we thank you all again for tuning in, and you have been attacked.
You have been attacked.
Enjoy yourselves.
Yeah, deuces.
Deuces.
Nice.